Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of Imperial Diecast. Last week I presented the 1/18 scale Ferrari Testarossa by Bburago, certainly a legendary car for the 1980s. But today, I want to show you one of the most iconic Ferraris of all time. The Ferrari F40. And this is really the most iconic Ferrari to me because every single angle of this car looks so much like a race car. The Ferrari F40 was built from 1987 to 1992 and was designed to celebrate Ferrari's 40th anniversary, as Enzo Ferrari founded the company 2 years after the war in 1947. This is a guy who was born in the 19th century, in 1898. He lived through World War I, World War II, saw the rise of automotive racing, established a racing pedigree, making Ferrari the most commonly known race car brand in the world. And by the end of the 1980s, he was almost 90 years old. And yet, he went out with a bang by designing another masterpiece. The most race car looking road car out there. I mean, this was the car I used to draw as a kid during art class. There's a reason these Ferrari F40s sell for more than $2 million these days. The contours are unlike any other car in the world. Only the F50 comes close. It embodies Ferrari like no other car the company has ever produced. I mean, doesn't the elongated and sloping front end remind you of a horse? Chief engineer Nicola Materazzi, who previously had experience with the 288 GTO and the Testarossa, almost single-handedly designed this car from the exterior to the engine, to the gearbox, to the air intakes. There were no creature comforts in this car. Out of all road-going supercars to this day, I'd say the F40 has arguably the most Spartan and bare-bones interior. The design philosophy, I'd guess, was based on Lotus. Make your car as light as possible. Make it nimble, and you don't need a big engine. All Ferrari F40s left the factory in red, so it would have made most sense for me to buy Bburago's red version. But I always felt like the F40 looks a bit too much like a toy car in red, and bought the black version because it hides some of the contours of the car and provides some understatement and seriosity. So this 1/24 scale model is made by Bburago. I picked this up around 4 years ago when I first started collecting model cars. And this is a model from the late 80s and early 90s. So this is a really old model, which is why the paint is comparatively in really good condition because the previous owner had taken good care of it, but if you look closely you will notice during this review that there's a lot of orange peel and some paint rash and stuff like that, but again, keep in mind the age of this model. Bburago re-released this car about 2 or 3 years ago, and externally, they fixed a lot of inaccuracies because they added center lock hubcaps, which this car does not have. They also added gas cap grooves and rear indicators as well. They also fixed the number of louvers on the rear windshield and added additional ones below the spoiler. But the biggest downside to the new F40 in 1/24 scale, and also why I would not recommend it, is not because they removed the sab belts, but because the entire back part of the car is sealed. Again, this is a ridiculous new trend Bburago has been following for the past 3 years with their latest 1/24 scale releases, namely only allowing for the doors to open. while up until, let's say, 2016 or 2017, the 124 scale models they used to make had opening doors and either hoods or trunks. But nope, not anymore. And the last good 124 scale Ferrari they made was the F12 Berlinetta, which I've also reviewed on my channel. But ever since then, new 124 scale Bburago releases like the F12 TDF, the 599 GTO, the 488 Pista, or the F40 all have a sealed engine bay cover. However, this older F40 does not, as you can see right here. But we'll get to that in a moment. Instead, as always, I'd like to begin the review by taking a look at the front of this car. And you can see that Bburago has done an excellent job on the fog lamps at the front, because even though this is a 124 scale model, they don't have any pegs in them, and the lights are separate pieces, and the glass also has some texture on it. In the middle you will find the Ferrari logo. Although it is not exactly in the center and is a sticker, it still sits where it is and doesn't peel off. Behind the fog lights we have the actual lights, and these are of course pop-up headlamps, which obviously do not work on this 124 scale model. They also don't work on the 118 scale Bburago. However, they do work on the 118 scale Tonka Polystil version, which is also a budget model. However, on the Tonka Polystil, the entire front trunk does not open and is inaccessible, whereas on the Bburago 118 it does. Of course, on this Bburago 124 it does not. Nevertheless, we do have these NACA ducts here in the front, and they're actually perforated. In fact, one of the most iconic things about the Ferrari F40 is the amount of NACA ducts it has. I mean, we got 2 here at the front, we have 2 at the back, and we have 2 on each side. The ones at the back are also perforated, but the ones on the sides are not. And another advantage of the 118 scale Bburago is that the NACA ducts on the side are also perforated. When I bought this model around 4 years ago, one of the first things that I did was I cleaned it. And back in the day I was really stupid, and instead of using water to dampen my microfiber cloth, I was using rubbing alcohol. And with these older Bburagos which do not have a thick clear coat above the paint, it's actually very easy to just scrape away the paint with the alcohol, so I mistakenly got rid of a portion here, which I then had to cover up with black marker. And in diffuse sunlight it's not really noticeable, thankfully. But under direct light you can see just how horrible it looks. Let's just say, lesson learned. The front air intakes are also modeled by Bburago, and they have like a gray texture behind them. And the center portion is perforated, but the other 2 are not. Now I decided not to paint these because the car itself is black, so if I also painted these black they'd be pretty hard to notice. But by not painting them, it's a bit easier to see the texture. Taking a look at the iconic side profile of the Ferrari F40, you can see that we have the Pininfarina badge in between the NACA ducts. We of course have the Cavallino Rampante da Ferrari prancing horse on the fenders. And the F40 branding you see here, it's on the wrong side. It's supposed to be on the passenger side only, so that it can be read in the direction the car is driving. But that's an issue the 118 scale Bburago has as well. You can see right up front here I have painted orange indicators, because the actual model did not have it, but the real car does. And I think it contrasts the black paint pretty well. Another modification I did was paint the exterior door handles in silver. Moving on to the back of the Ferrari F40, arguably my most favorite view of this car. You can see that we have a big chrome piece saying Ferrari. Now, another modification that I did to this car was that I painted this in a black wash. Because you see in this previous picture, Bburago had just put a chrome piece here without any kind of shading between the letters, and that would make the Ferrari logo a bit unreadable. Whereas now that I've actually added some shading to it, it looks a whole lot better in my opinion. Similarly, another modification that I did was I added silver tail light indicators, I guess they are. It's not perfect, but I mean the original car did not have them. It just had like red lights. And so now it's a little bit more realistic. Just like that, I also painted the center of the triple exhausts in black. But other than that, I mean, what I do like about this Bburago is that the rear grille is perforated. And this is on a 1/24 scale car. I mean, how rare is that? It again goes to show that these old 1990s Bburagos had more intricate details like that compared to the new ones, where they would just put one big plastic piece with some texture on it. We have a pre-EU Italian license plate saying MO for Modena 983. And obviously the highlight of the back is this massive fixed spoiler, which gives the F40 its iconic rear view. As we move on further up, let's get to this rear engine cover here. One of the biggest inaccuracies the model has compared to the real Ferrari F40 is the number of louvers. You can see how on this model there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on each side, 18 in total, but on the real car there are only 5 on each side, and 2 more down here in the middle. This same inaccuracy also exists on the 1/18 scale Bburago, but on the Tonka Polistil version, you actually get the accurate number of louvers. However, the rear engine cover glass is opaque on the Tonka, but clear on the Bburago, both in 1/18 and in 1/24. And through the clear glass, we can already see the intricacies of the engine, even on this small 1/24 scale model. But let's open up the back to see it in all its glory. And so the back of the car opens up like this, but it does not stay up because the entire back is also made out of die-cast metal, just like the rest of the car. So I'll have to use a hood prop. I'm just going to use this part here so that it doesn't fall. I think a toothpick makes for a better prop rod, but you don't have to worry on the 1/18 scale version because there it already comes with a plastic one. But now let's take a closer look at this engine. So what you're looking at here is a 2.9 liter V8 twin turbo engine with 478 horsepower at 7,000 RPM. The Ferrari F40 can achieve 0 to 100 km per hour in approximately 4 seconds and a top speed of 321 km per hour, or 199 miles per hour. It's actually pretty impressive seeing a 1/24 scale car with an opening rear engine bay cover like this. And for this scale, the level of detail here is truly magnificent. The entire engine is made out of chrome, but there's still enough shading here to allow for a realistic look to the engine. I mean, you can see the intercoolers, you can see the transaxle down there. And I believe Bburago has even put in the correct number of cylinders. If we can count them, that should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right there. So yeah, very remarkable. So as we move on to the passenger side and check out the interior, I have to say that I'm quite impressed with the level of detail that Bburago put into this car. Now, I'm not sure what these things right here are supposed to be, but on the real car, you only have what appears to be the outlines of a glove box here, which, however, is bolted shut. And in general, the interior of the Ferrari F40 is very Spartan, not just here on this 1/24 scale model, but also on the real car, because as you can see in this picture, there's really not a whole lot of stuff going on. Very race car-ish. In the middle, you can see a 5-speed dogleg manual shifter. We also have 3 gauges in the middle, They are just stickers, but they're there. And they show the oil temperature, oil pressure, and the fuel. 3 air vents are also modeled below those. You also have these additional air vents on the dash. Now on the 118 they are perforated, here they're not, but they're still there. And here's a look at the seats of the Ferrari F40. You can see that they have the Saab belt racing seat belts, although they're just made out of plastic. And the seats have some texture on them, and this is supposed to represent a 5-point harness. In the middle we have some storage compartments made out of chrome, just like the handbrake. This car does not have door handles on the inside. And no, that's not because this is a 1/24 scale model lacking detail. Quite the opposite. Bburago has in fact modeled the accurate mechanism on the F40, despite it being only 1/24 scale, although they did forget to model the window crank next to it. But you see this? This is the door handle. A cord. You yank it, and the door opens. That's how bare bones the F40 is in real life. As we move on to check out the driver's side, you'll notice another modification that I did to this car's 3-spoke steering wheel. I painted the yellow background for the raised prancing horse on the steering wheel. Behind the wheel, you'll see the analog gauge cluster, consisting of the speedo, the tach, and 2 additional gauges to the left and right, showing the engine temperature and the turbocharger's boost gauge. And finally, we take a look at the F40's undercarriage. Very flat. Not sure if this is like this on the real car. You can see some riveting. I wish Bburago had at least painted the grey plastic in black. But you can see it says here Bburago Ferrari F40 1987, Scala 1/24, Italia. I appreciate the amount of detail here at the back. You can see right through the rear axle and into the engine. And Bburago also modeled the louvers down here, although they forgot to model the ones below the spoiler. So yeah, pretty good undercarriage detail for a 1/24 scale model. Guys, thanks so much for checking out the review of the Ferrari F40. This legendary supercar from the late 1980s and early 1990s in 1/24 scale by Bburago. If you want to see some competitors this car had back in the day, feel free to check out my other reviews. I will see you again in my next video, and until then, have a wonderful day. This is Imperial Diecast, signing out.